In this tutorial, we demonstrate processing a report using the dlex-layout endpoint. In the tutorial Create a Report, we use DynamicPDF Designer to create a dlex template that processed JSON data to create a PDF report. Here, we're going to use that dlex file, and we're going to use it to process the report using the DynamicPDF Cloud API's dlex-layout REST endpoint. The DynamicPDF Cloud API is a set of REST endpoints for creating and modifying PDF documents. You can also use it to get metadata about those documents. It's easy to use, it's efficient and scalable, globally available, and secure. Key features include an online document report designer, merging, stamping, and adding barcodes to PDFs, form-filling PDFs and retrieving form-filled information, converting images to PDF, encrypting and securing PDFs, retrieving text, XMP, and other information. We also have an online tool called Designer that makes creating PDF documents from a report template easy and straightforward. And you can call our REST APIs directly using your own client API or a tool like curl, or you can select one of our client APIs that make calling the REST endpoint easier. We have one in C#, Java, Node.js, and PHP. Get up and running quickly using the DynamicPDF Cloud API. Our online designer, the REST APIs, and client libraries make it easy to add PDF capabilities to your applications. The DynamicPDF Cloud API consists of the following endpoints: dlex-layout, image info, PDF info, PDF text, PDF XMP, and PDF. Let's begin by navigating to the tutorial. Select Docs, Tutorials, Designer, User Report, dlex-layout endpoint. In the last report, Create a Report using a template, we created a dlex file combined with some JSON data to generate a PDF document. In this tutorial, we're going to demonstrate how you can use that dlex file combined with the JSON data, calling the dlex-layout REST endpoint. Now, to complete this tutorial, if you didn't add the resources in the samples folder, Creating a Report Template Designer, then go ahead and add them now. And after we create the samples folder, we're going to have an invoice dlex and an invoice JSON. To demonstrate how you would use the JSON data in an actual application, we're going to copy the JSON data and we're going to download it to our local file system. So when we make our dlex call, the dlex file is going to remain in the cloud, and the data is actually going to be in our local file system. So let's go ahead and log in. Now, if you don't have an account, you can sign up for a free account here. But let's assume you have an account. So go ahead and log in. And that takes us to the Environment Manager. Select Manage Resources, select Samples, Add Samples, and that opens the Samples dialog. From that dialog, select Create a Report using a template, and that adds it to our samples folder. So let's go ahead and look at what we've got in it. We have our invoice.dlex, our invoice.json, and our invoice.pdf. Go ahead and download invoice.json to your local file system. Before we do anything, let's double click on the dlex file to open it in Designer. Let's close the report and exit Designer. Okay, let's exit the Resource Manager. Now, in your local file system, we're assuming the folder temp DynamicPDF-API-samples /using-dlex-layout and rename it to invoice-local.json. The dlex-layout endpoint takes a POST request containing the path to the dlex file and the JSON data. The endpoint then generates a PDF document and is returned as an HTTP response to your calling application. The following summarizes the HTTP POST request and the resulting response's content type. Note that if you use any of the client libraries, which we are in just a few minutes, then these REST call details are handled for you by the API. You can call the endpoint directly, or you can use one of DynamicPDF's client libraries. Let's illustrate calling the PDF dlex endpoint using Postman, curl, and then by using the Java, C#, Node.js, and PHP client libraries. Access to the complete source for this project is available at one of the following GitHub projects. The Java project is Java Client Examples, and the file name is designerreporttemplate.java. The C# project is Designer Report Template, and that's in the .NET Client Examples solution. You can get the Node.js example, and the file is designerreporttemplate.js, and you can get that from the Node.js Client Examples. And the PHP is available at PHP Client Examples, and the file name is designerreporttemplate.php. Let's begin by considering the curl example. Copy the curl command and paste it to Notepad. Now we need to remove all the hard returns, and there's our curl command. We have our post, the URL, the dlex path, and note that that's the path to the file in the resource manager, and the path to the layout data, which is our local resource. It's our local data. And then the output. Go ahead and copy the command. Open the command prompt and paste the command. Run it. Okay, let's go to our folder. And there it is, invoice-curl-output.pdf. Let's go ahead and open the PDF. And there you go. There's the generated PDF. Now let's consider the Postman example. If you're not familiar with using Postman, then you can go online and they have a lot of tutorials on their site, but Postman's pretty intuitive. So I'm going to assume you have Postman downloaded. So let's go ahead and start up Postman. And I've created a post request. And first I put in the path to the endpoint. Then in the body, we have dlex path. And again, that's the samples folder. And the layout data, which is the path to the local JSON file. How did I get the samples dlex file? Well, you can get that from the resource manager. Let's go ahead and do that real quick. So let's go to the resource manager, select the folder, right-click on invoice.dlex, and select copy file path. That will copy the file path in cloud storage to your clipboard. Let's paste it. And you can see it didn't change. So we have the correct path. Invoice.json is a file. So we need to select file. And then we need to navigate to the location in our local file system. And invoice, go ahead and select the file. And there it adds it to the layout data. Now we need to add the header. And go ahead and be sure to leave that bearer there, or add the bearer. That's an important part of the key. But let's go get the actual key now. And we get that from the environment manager. So go ahead and open an environment manager. Select apps and API keys. Select copy, close it. And now let's paste the API key. Okay, everything should be good. So let's go ahead and run it. And there you go. There is the PDF displayed in Postman. Okay, so that's how you would use Postman. Now let's consider the C#.NET example. In this example, we're going to go in depth. We're actually going to do it by hand. And then in the Java, Node.js, and PHP examples, we're going to just, we're going to review the code, compare it to what we created in the C# example. Let's go ahead and start Visual Studio. Okay, select .NET Client Examples. That's our solution. Okay, right-click on the solution and select Add a New Project. And make it a console application. And let's name it Designer Report Template. Next. And go ahead and keep the target framework. And we've created our project. Right-click on Designer Report Template. We need to add our NuGet package. Select Manage NuGet Packages. Select Browse. And type in DynamicPDF API. And there's the NuGet package. Go ahead and select it. Install. Okay. Wait for it to install. And once it's installed, let's go ahead and close that tab. Return to program.cs. Let's add the using statement. Using DynamicPDF.API. And now we're going to add a method named run. So public static void run string API key string base path. Okay, before we forget, let's go ahead and modify main to have the call to run. So run and API key, which we'll get in a second, and then the base path. C:/temp DynamicPDF API samples / using dlex-layout. Go ahead and add the API key. So if you need to, go to the resource manager and copy the key, all the steps we took earlier. But I'll just assume you already did that. So copy and paste, so add the API key. And now we're ready to start doing the bulk of our coding. Create a new layout data resource instance. So layout data resource equals new layout data resource base path plus invoice-local.json. So this class loads our local JSON data resource. Now we need to create a dlex-layout instance, and that wraps the endpoint to the dlex-layout endpoint. So dlex endpoint equals new dlex-layout. And now we need to add the path to our dlex file, and then we're going to and then the layout data instance. Okay, let's set the API key for the dlex endpoint. And now we want to actually call the endpoint, and the endpoint returns a PDF response. So PDF response equals dlex endpoint process. So now if it's successful, we want to save it as a PDF file. If it's not successful, we want to print out the error JSON. So let's go ahead and create an if block. Then we want to write the response to a file. So file.writeAllBytes base path plus invoice-c#-output.pdf. And then we want to get the content from the PDF response. Now the content is if you can't guess, the content is a byte array. So PDF response.content. Now we want to handle the error condition. So else console.writeLine PDF response.error JSON. Oh, we need to change is successful to be uppercase. Okay, everything looks good. So let's go ahead and run it. Go ahead and change to the, make sure you're changed to the right project up here. And click run. And now let's close the window and let's go to the folder to see the PDF. Open the folder and there's the file, invoice C# output. And there you go. It had generated the PDF for us. Now let's consider the Java example. Now for our Java client library, you can get that from Maven. The Java example is available at GitHub, and you install the Java client library using Maven. And the steps are pretty much the same as the C# example. I like to use Eclipse, so let's go ahead and start Eclipse. Wait for it to load, launch, and I assume you already have the project loaded. After the project's loaded, go over to designer report template.java and let's open it. And there you go. It should look pretty much like the C# example. We have our main method, and that calls the run method that we created with our API key and the path, the base path. In our run method, we create a new layout data instance resource, and that points to our local JSON file for the data. Then we create a dlex-layout instance. We take the path to the dlex file that resides in our cloud storage, and we also take the layout data resource instance. We set the API key. Then we call the dlex-layout endpoint using the process method that returns the response. If it's successful, then we write the output. Then we get the content from the response and we write the output to a file as a PDF. Otherwise, we just print out the error JSON. Okay, now let's run the application. Now let's navigate to our local file system. And there you go. There's the created PDF. Now let's consider the Node.js example. The DynamicPDF API is available using NPM. I like to use Visual Studio Code for Node projects. So go ahead and open Visual Studio Code. So select designer report template.js. And there's the Node.js code for our example project. We have a static asynchronous run method. We get the layout data from our local file system. We create a new dlex-layout instance where we pass the relative path to the dlex file that resides in our cloud storage. And we pass an instance of the layout data. We set the API key. We call the process method and we get a result. Of course, we use await because this is asynchronous. If it's successful, then we output the response's content to a file. Otherwise, we just go ahead and we just log the error JSON. And then at the very bottom, we call it as a standalone application. Okay, so in the terminal, type node designer report template.json. Now let's navigate to our local file system. And there it is. Open it, and there's our generated PDF. Now let's consider the PHP example. You can get the PHP example project from GitHub. And for PHP development, I like to use Visual Studio Code. So let's go ahead and open it. And I'm going to assume you already have the example project loaded. And there you go. There's designer report template.php. And it should look pretty much the same as the other examples. We have our base path, our API key, we have a run method. And then in the run method, we create a new layout data resource instance. And that instance points to the to our local JSON file. Then we have our dlex-layout instance, which has the path to the dlex in cloud storage. And it also has the layout data instance. And then we set the API key. And then we call the process method and return the response. And then we take the response and we write it to a PDF. Then down at the bottom, we have code that runs it as a standalone application. So down in the command prompt, we type PHP designer report template.php, hit return. Now let's navigate to the folder, and there's the PDF. Open it, and there's the generated report. Before we wrap up the tutorial, let's discuss the workflow for the dlex-layout endpoint. This is the workflow. This is a typical workflow of how you would use Designer combined with the DynamicPDF Cloud API endpoint. Okay, so in Designer, you're going to create your dlex-layout file, and you're also going to create a JSON file with sample data that you need to generate a report using. And then that sample data you would upload to the resource manager. And then as you work with Designer, you would test and debug the JSON data as you test and debug your dlex template. And you would repeat that as necessary. Then when it came time for a real report and calling the dlex-layout endpoint, you really shouldn't store real data, client data in the cloud. So what you would do is you would have that JSON file in your local file system or local server. Then you would call the dlex-layout endpoint, as we did here, and the dlex-layout endpoint, when it's called, would then take the dlex file that is in cloud storage, and it would upload the JSON data from your local file system, and then it would combine the two to process the dlex file and return the resultant PDF. So your real JSON data never resides in DynamicPDF's Cloud API. For more information, you can also refer to the Creating a PDF from dlex-layout endpoint example. So as you can see, using the dlex-layout endpoint with a dlex file you created using Designer is a powerful and straightforward way to create PDF reports. And best of all, both Designer and the dlex-layout endpoint reside on the DynamicPDF cloud. I'm James, Developer Evangelist at DynamicPDF, reminding you, when you think PDF, think DynamicPDF Cloud API. See you next time.